All right, we are officially live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Amber Rose, also known as the Religious Hippie. You can basically follow me on any social media platform. And today we finally rescheduled, and Daniel is here with us, the Jewish Catholic, to talk about some great controversial topics. And I am so excited. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you for having me on, and I am so sorry for everyone for the horrible time zone incident yesterday. But we're here. We're here. Let's get
The
into it.
time zones are just absolutely horrible. Like that's the main thing whenever I have issues with live streams or even podcasts and scheduling is time zones. So happens. It's all good. But yeah, we're getting into a controversial topic today. A few of them actually. I'm pretty excited about that. So do you want to just like deep dive in, or do you want to give people like an overview of what we're going to talk about first?
Yeah, so just like as a little insight into what we're going to be talking about, just in case anybody can't watch the whole thing, we're going to be diving into the alphabet controversy. And I'll try to be careful with my wording. I'm not trying to get Amber Rose canceled. I'm sure folks know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to be covering different topics. Firstly, talking about how we can operate this as Catholics with our families, sheltering our families from potential illnesses that may come from this, and also how we interact in this world, being bold about it, not hiding. And, I think as Catholics, we've been too quiet for too long, and it's time to stand up and show who we are, but in a loving manner, in a way that represents Christ and the church in the proper light. And then at the end of it, just going over the grand scheme of things in a spiritual lens, because at the end of the day, as most Catholics would know, this is a very spiritual matter. Even though it seems like it's just something in the social sphere, there's a lot to it.
Oh, yes. And that's one of the biggest things, especially today, because we are in this, you can't escape it. We're in this
Right.
point where it went from, I think I talked about this with some other people on a podcast, where it's like we went from legalizing, same sex marriage to then it becoming a parade day to then a week to a month. And now you can't escape
It's
it. It's
everywhere.
everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's also been very shocking for me here. So for anybody that doesn't know, I live in Tokyo. So in Japan, it's one of the most reserved countries I've ever seen ever in my life. Very conservative, even in fashion. Even though a lot of people might get the image that Tokyo is very wild in their fashion, it's a very small group. But now I've started to see it here, so much so that there was even a parade. But that was kind of shut down very quickly, thank God, because that's something we don't need here. We don't need anywhere, but yeah, it's everywhere. You really can't escape it. And I've seen, I'm away from the States, so I don't get to see it as much as you probably get to see it. But when I look into the news, it's absurd.
It's everywhere. And I mean, we both have different perspectives because you have two young kids. I don't have kids yet, but I've, been nannying, babysitting for a long time, and I see the effect it has on children. And it's
Yeah,
like I don't think a lot of parents do their due diligence to protect their children from this, but then also how can they when it's being shoved in their faces all the time?
right. Yeah,
And that's
it's
like the
definitely a bombardment.
yes, 100%. And I guess as the LGBT, alphabet agenda kind of creeps into schools and to society and to everything. I mean, it's a lot. How do we as Catholics fight against it and protect our children? And I don't have kids yet, but for those who do, it's like, how do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak only from my personal experience, and of course, as I mentioned, so this is kind of a heads up for anybody who wants to say that he's got it easy because he's in Japan. It still exists, especially when, for example, my children are just learning about YouTube. Unfortunately, I can't hide them from that forever. So there is this wave, as we can all tell, of all of this being pushed in all different ways, whether it's businesses, whether it's TV shows, even kids shows now. It's almost impossible to escape it, right? So what I have to do as a parent, number one, in a very simplistic, very secular way that anybody could do, because I'm sure that even people that aren't religious might feel a little bit weirded out by all of this. But what I do is I screen everything they watch before they watch it. So if it's something on TV, it's something on YouTube, I have to screen it and make sure that it's okay. Now, typically, this only is needed when they're watching something that comes from America. But if it's Japanese shows, it's actually quite easy to not have that being pushed on you. And as a matter of fact, one of the most famous shows for all children in Japan is this show called Anpanman. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Have you heard of it?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, Anpanman. It's actually a Catholic that created that show, and it's about this
Oh.
character who's like a bread. He's made out of bread, right? And he feeds people from his own self, which is kind of like the Eucharist, Yeshua giving himself or Jesus giving himself to us, feeding us in the form of bread or what would appear as bread. So I thought that it was really interesting. And when my wife told me that the creator is actually Catholic, I'm like, okay, so this one is safe, at least. But that's the first thing. Just screen everything before they watch it. And then the second one, I think it's the most obvious. As a Catholic, we need to remain prayerful for our children. We need to be praying over them and with them every day, every night. So one of the things that we do here in my family is that every night before they go to sleep, part of their sleep routine is to pray a family rosary. And after I finish with the whole family, I will go just to my children, just do the sign of the cross on their forehead, things like things that tips that I've gotten from other priests. Um, I think it was actually Father Mike Smith that talked about that. And of course, there are traditional prayers that I learned even from when I was Jewish, practicing Judaism. I don't even know how to say that anymore. So the Aaronic benediction, and that one time during Bible in a Year, I was listening to Father Mike Smith, and he said that that was a good prayer to do over children, and that a lot of Catholics did that too. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea that they also did the same prayer over their children. So that's another practice. So again, just screening everything is number one, but also that's not as priority as the second one, which is to just pray with them, pray over them, pray for them often, every day. It has to be something that's always happening. And there's, of course, more things that we could do. But, of course, even if you don't have children, I'm sure you could give us some hints as well, something that you think might be useful.
Yeah, I think also the biggest thing, I know your kids are little right now, but when they
Hmm.
get bigger, like being able that they know they could come to you and talk to you about these things without being like, well, why are you watching that stuff? Or where did you hear that from? Getting accused for stuff. Because I think
Right.
nowadays in America, especially, a lot of kids kind of get this like either they're pushed into it or they their parents are completely opposed to it, which I mean, obviously we should be completely opposed to it.
Sure.
But then when the kids discover this stuff, and they
Yeah.
don't know how to react to it or handle it because their parents maybe never told them about it or they never, you know, because they're kids, they don't know how to process things,
Right.
right? And then they go to their parents, and then their parents are just like, well, where did you hear that from? Like, why are you talking about this? Instead of actually, trying to figure out, okay, like, what am I dealing with here? I think it's important for us to approach it from a very understanding and loving point of view and not just like jump on them right away.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the other thing is yeah, screening. I have to screen my own stuff. I mean, the amount of TV shows and movies and things these days where it's like the first season or the first 3 episodes are great. There's no
Right.
agenda. There's nothing going on. And then like the third episode or so or the
They have to
second
ruin it.
season hits, they ruin it every single time. And I think Kathleen actually mentions that. Yeah, she said that she hates it when they ruin their favorite shows with the propaganda. And it's so true because they sneak it in everywhere and it's
Yeah.
inescapable. And so I think we also need to have a conversation with our children once they become that age, because I've said this time and time again, if you don't teach your children, the world will, and the world will
Yep.
not teach your children about Christ.
Absolutely. That's a super good point, and I agree 100% with it. One thing regarding that, just to emphasize of how we approach it, and this is something that I know that I have to be thinking about already, because I have other people that I interact with, some of the younger people that I've met that are from different parts of the world that we met in this international parish. One of the things that I've noticed is that everybody has a different perspective on it. Of course, we all agree that it's wrong because of what the church teaches us, but the approach is super important as well. Like you said, it's not just black and white saying, okay, this is bad, this is wrong. But what if your child has been infected by this or being basically brainwashed with teachers? You hear all the stories about how certain schools will not tell the parents about what the children are saying or what they're thinking, when it's the teachers sometimes themselves that are kind of like sneakily pushing this, or sometimes overtly just pushing this into the kids. So what happens when your child comes in and starts telling you things like, hey, what about this and that, or I think that I may be this or that? So the approach, I think it's super important, so that I agree with that. It has to be coming in from a loving manner, and as you said, we have to come in teaching them first, which also leads me to another point that I would say in regards to how do we protect our children from this, which is making sure that we are giving a solid foundation as to why we believe what we believe in the first place. Because for a lot of people, sadly, even Catholics, they may think that the teachings of the church are archaic. For example, they're saying, "Oh, this is outdated. The church needs to rethink its position on this. We need to start opening our minds because of science or because of social constructs that have changed." But the reality is that Christ's truth never changes. So we need to be able to teach our children why it is that we believe what we believe. So, for example, understanding that the marriage between a man and a woman is a mirror image of Christ as the groom and the church as the bride, and why that works in that way. What, for example, the Eucharist means in relation to human intimacy, where Christ gives himself completely to us. And when you're in a marital covenant, which is also just like we are with Christ in a covenant, in a marital contract, one gives themselves to the other completely, and it only works one way, right? Because it's supposed to produce fruit, and in the physical sense it's also producing fruit, which is children. Children are the actual, and this is amazing for other areas, something that you're a really strong advocate about, the pro-life movement, right? So understanding that children are the physical manifestation of your love with your spouse. So understanding in that way, I think will help people understand that there's a solid foundation for why we believe things, and it's not just some archaic belief. And sorry for going in a
Right.
rant.
Oh no, it's okay. We love rants here. I go on rants too, but usually mine are like here, 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 here. At least you had like a straight line. I think that's just a
Thank you,
woman
thank
thing
you.
though. We like to go all over the place. But no, it's so true. And also I think that's important because a lot of people don't know their faith. A lot of parents don't know their faith, and so their kids don't grow up knowing the fundamentals about their faith, so they end up falling away later because they were their
Yeah,
questions of why were never answered. It's
right.
always met with because I told you so, or because this is just what we do. And it's like, okay, well, it's great to follow tradition, but there also needs to be an understanding of tradition as well. I
Yeah.
mean, we need to understand why we do certain things,
Hmm.
but some kids might not understand it till they're a little bit older. And with the
Right.
pro-life movement going on today, like you mentioned, I mean, I've talked about this with people before too, where nowadays people know what abortion is. They know what it is.
Hmm.
And it's not so
Right.
much a need of educating people now on what it, like we still do need to educate, but now people
Sure.
know what it is, but they're celebrating it. They're
Yeah.
celebrating all of these things. It's not oh, yeah, I guess I just didn't understand what it was to begin with. It's like they just don't care. And
Hmm.
it's becoming this, it was always a human rights issue, but now it's not about education as much as it is like, how do we even talk to people who are just like, oh, I know what it is, and yeah, it is this, but I'm doing it anyways, or I support it.
Hmm.
And it's just like there's so much
Yeah.
hate. It's like, what do you do with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the big issues that you are starting to see in both realms of what we're talking about is this issue where people have become really proud. Obviously, this is why they have a pride parade,
Oh
proud
yeah.
of their sin, right? And this is something that has become more overtly pronounced throughout all of culture. But we shouldn't be shocked by this at all because scripture tells us that as the time goes on in the later days, what's going to happen is that people will call good evil and evil good. And you see that very plainly today where people are very happy and excited to share these things. And I've seen plenty of videos, thank goodness, that I don't see that here in Japan. Again, this is one of the perks of being here where people aren't really vocal about they're not vocal about anything really, whether it be political or religious, because it's a very atheistic country. But people are very to themselves. But whenever I go online to see what's going on with my home country, I see that there are these videos of people that are maybe like somebody in the streets that's pro-life, and they're trying to reach out to these people in either pride parades or in abortion clinics or things like that. And what you will see is that a lot of times these people are just full of rage. And that's one of the things that's crazy to me. They're just so angry, or they're so proud of whatever it is that they're saying. And like you said, they know. They know now what they're doing. And they'll say, yep. As a matter of fact, I think I heard of a song that has been like in the charts of this rapper that said exactly that, and that they're
They're getting
basically
canceled
proud
now,
of doing that. Oh, really?
aren't they? I thought they were,
I don't
but
know.
there's
I didn't follow it.
I thought somebody got canceled. Maybe they. No, it has to be somebody else because they never cancel people for actually supporting it. They always cancel people for
Yeah.
not supporting
Exactly.
it. So, but
Yeah.
that's it. There's so many LGBTQ songs. There's so many TV shows, movies. Just there's everywhere, everywhere. You can't go one place and not see a pride flag or some sort of decoration. And
Yeah.
now it's unfortunate because now I look at a rainbow and I don't see God's promise, and I think
Very
that's
sad.
also a huge issue. Is it's like we're
Yeah.
twisting that. I went to the Dobbs rally for the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the 1 year
Yep.
anniversary. And we were on one side of the street, and obviously there were counter protesters on the other side. There's always counter protesters. But these counter protesters, they were all from LGBTQ communities, all of them. Not one of them
Of
was
course.
like just, pro-choice. It was all mumbled in together. And the
Yeah.
things that they would like yell at us, um, it was just atrocious. Whereas like we're over here having our own little rally, and yeah, we're talking kind of loud into the microphone, but it's not like we're shouting at them.
Right.
We're just kind of like having our own little thing with our band, and and then we start marching and stuff, and then they start trying to march as well, and they try to follow us, and at one point we're parallel with them and we have to cross the street, so the cops kind of came between all of us and they tried to trample the cops
Oh
to
my
catch up with
goodness. Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my gosh, like where does this come from? Why there has to
Yep.
be a spiritual element to this.
For sure.
Has to be. But at the same time, how does it get this bad? Like
Yeah.
how? I don't
I,
understand.
well, I think for starters, to understand why this has gone to the extent that it has gone to, is because of us being quiet. And I think we played that let's be tolerant towards everyone and let's be loving and charitable and inviting. I guess it comes from a good heart. I mean, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But unfortunately, what happens is that evil is not ever going to say, oh, thank you for being nice. Now I'm just going to stop doing whatever it is that I'm doing. Evil will persist and will grow when the good is silent. So this is something that I spoke about with some friends of mine, which is that because of us being quiet and pretending to be nice, the voices, even though they're a minority, because they are really a smaller group than the average size of a country or whatever it is that is against this, their voices sound very loud because we are so quiet. And I think it's time for us to stop playing that card where we just let anybody trample over the truth and trample over the faith. Now, thankfully, I'm seeing a lot of movement specifically from Catholics, where they're starting to say, okay, enough is enough. And not to say that we are now going to become mean or, jerks just like everybody else is. But we need to do the things kind of like what you guys are doing, which is making it public, making it known that there is another viewpoint. Because a lot of times what happens is that people are not hearing the other side of the story. They're not hearing the logical arguments as to why these things are senseless. So when they see somebody like you or perhaps somebody like me and in this conversation and we're speaking about it, somebody out there, number one, is going to say, oh, I didn't know about this until now. Or even those people that have heard of us going against them, there's a seed that could be planted. Regardless of whether they listen to or not, it's our duty to defend the faith. And defending the faith means defending these truths. For example, the fact that life, is precious from the moment of conception, and that it's the family also is extremely crucial, not just for society's sake, but individually and for the souls. You are well aware that family is crucial. That's why God revealed himself to us in the form of Jesus Christ as a baby, having a mother and a foster father that would actually help him grow up as a little one, right? So if God himself humbled himself enough to come in that form and be dependent on human parents, that shows you the cruciality of family. So I think one of the things that has happened is that we've just been too quiet, and it's time to stand up.
No, I completely agree. And I think we're kind of battling the media as well, because the media will really try to twist things to make it seem like we're the bad guy. They'll
Yeah.
really try to make it seem as though we're the ones that are causing all the problems. And, they're covering up so many stories, so many atrocious stories. I talked about this in my live stream a couple days ago, where there was a story in Boston of a after party for a parade, and there were drag queens. There were 6 of them. One of them died of cardiac arrest because there was drugs and sexual objects and adult clothing and things of that nature. So they called the ambulance or whatever. Firefighters show up, and they're basically checking out the whole building just to make sure that nobody else is dead, so to speak. And they find 4 little kids in a water closet with one of the men. And they're trying to cover that story up. Now, the kids are in custody. The kids are safe now, but
Yeah.
they are trying to cover up that story. And it's like, how many times are we going to let this happen? How many times are we
Right.
allowing this to happen?
No, first of all, I didn't hear this story personally, so I'm very disgusted to hear it. But I know of other incidents that have kind of a similar story. For example, the whole monkeypox thing that was happening for
Yeah.
a while. And then they found out that it's only transmitted in one certain way. And then they found out that there were children that were infected. And the whole story turned out to be this horrible story when people start putting the dots together and they realized, oh man, for this to have happened, that means that this other evil thing must have happened. And when people realized that, that quickly started going away, so much so that now you don't even hear a story about this supposed deadly new virus that was going to be spreading around. But yeah, like you're saying, the media is against us. Absolutely.
It is. And the thing, what you were saying about the family as well, one of those men claimed to be their father.
Oh, that's even worse. Come on.
So I'm like, yeah, and Our Lady of Fatima specifically said that the last battle is going to be between Satan and the family, and this is
Yes.
the most important time to be
Yep.
praying with your families, like you have said, to be cultivating those family values, because they're not going to get that when they get out into the world. Kids are already going to be bombarded with awful, terrible things, and the home should be the safe haven. It should be where they come
Right.
home and they should feel safe from those things, not that they're getting bombarded with more of it.
Right, absolutely. No, the home needs to be the place where not only protected but also fed the truth. And as we spoke about before, getting that early on and getting it in a way that the children will feel that they can come to you and speak. Because what I've seen happen, and I mean, I hate to admit this, But this was one of the things that happened even in my family, where my family was very, very over, not protective, but very harsh in these things, where it ended up affecting one of the members in my family, and they ended up basically falling way down the side on this matter. So I know what it's like to have that overarching, not being able to communicate type of parenting for that particular topic. Not to say that my parents are like that in all senses, but in this particular topic, it didn't go well. So I think is leaving the door open to your children and always communicating with them about other things. It doesn't have to be focused on this. It's just making it so that your children know that they can come to you, that they can open up, and that they can feel welcome in a conversation, so that you can direct these things and that they can take your views as something that has weight. Because another thing that happens is, not only do you have media, not only do you have influencers out there, whether it be like Instagram or TikTok, but you also have teachers being involved in this, right? So this means that if you have all of that, and then on top of that, you also have your friends that might be involved in this and that they may have particular views, children are most likely going to be listening to their friends. I can't even tell you the amount of times where I put the view of a friend of mine over my parents on certain topics, right? Because I felt that I could open up more. And I think this is natural for a lot of young people, where they feel like, I can't tell this to my mom, I can't tell this to my dad, so let me speak with my friends about it. And then it turns out being a trap for you, because your friends, even though they may love you, sometimes they don't, or sometimes they're just as confused as you are. So it doesn't benefit. So yeah, just keeping that open for your kids.
I completely agree. And I think a part of that means you have to educate yourself and you
True.
need to practice. I don't think this is just an overnight thing that happens for parents who might be like Daniel's parents, where it's like you're hostile in certain topics. I don't think it's an overnight fix. I think you need to communicate with your child about this, depending their age, if they're a teenager, and be like, I'm sorry I blew up at you about this. Like, I really want to be able to discuss this with you. This is just a very hard topic, but I am going to try and learn as much as I can so I can give you the best. Communication is key. We can't just
Yeah.
yell at them and shelter them and think we're protecting them by being like, oh, don't
Right.
even look into it. Like, don't even go
Yeah.
there. It's like they're going to
Yeah.
go there. They're going to look into it. And are you going to be a part of them doing that or not? And the other
Right.
thing is like your friends, yeah, like you said, they might affirm you, but they might just be as confused, and they might affirm you in things that you don't necessarily believe in, but you start believing in because your friends
Right.
are doing it. It's like
Yeah.
what is that called? Group thinking something.
Yeah.
It was
Group
this
mentality.
huge thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was this huge thing that took over universities back in 2018, 19, and 20, where college girls would go to university, they'd get in these sororities or these other groups, and then all of a sudden they were identifying as one of the alphabet letter
Yep.
people. And it's because they were around other people and who kind of identified as it. And it was all this group thinking.
Yep.
And it's like, so you have to really prepare the family unit. You really have to take that
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah. I wanted to actually jump into that because I had this conversation with a friend of mine here. She's Japanese. She's a friend of my wife's, and we've become friends as well. And we had a conversation about this particular topic, and we noticed, or we highlighted the fact that how interesting it is that you go back a couple of years, you did not hear about any of these things,
Nope.
especially with the extra letter that was added to the LGB, right? There was more added, and now there's more being added to it every day, basically. But you never heard about these things. I'll tell you that growing up, I knew perhaps one kid that was just a little bit, as they used to say, and no offense to anybody who struggles with same-sex attraction, but it's somebody they would say, oh, that person's a little bit fruity, they would say, right? So again, no
Yeah,
disrespect,
I remember
but that's what
that.
they would say, right? And or even if everybody might know that that particular person was attracted to somebody of their same sex, but that's it. We didn't even make a big deal, and this wasn't even somebody that was like picked on or bullied or anything. It just happened to be somebody that we knew. But
Yeah.
now It's ridiculous, and I don't remember what the number is, but it's like well over 40% of Gen Z identifies as one of these alphabet letters, right? So it's really interesting that it has all blown up, and I think part of it has to do with what you just mentioned, is this collective mass mentality where everybody starts like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I feel the same way too. Oh, I feel the same way too, and it just starts spreading basically like a virus. So this matter that we're dealing with, it feels like it's growing at an extremely fast rate, but it's not out of nowhere. This has been something that has been in the works, and I believe the first seeds of it being sprouting would be over in the 1960s when the sexual revolution really started blowing up. And during that time, it was a time where people were experimenting and exploring, and it became more vocal, and many people got involved in this. Then feminism started blowing up as well. And all of these things, every single one, if you start actually analyzing every single one of these things, from the pro-life or pro-abort issue, if you start taking the LGBT alphabet letter stuff, if you start analyzing all of these things, you will notice that every single one of them is aimed at the attack of what Our Lady advised us against in Our Lady of Fatima, which is the attack of the family. So analyze everything. For example, masculinity. Now it's something that's toxic. Now it's something that everybody, if you're a strong man, if you go to the gym, if you're somebody that wants to educate themselves, all of these things are looked upon as negatives, right? So men are now villainized. When you have a weak man, you have a weak household, which is what you have seen happen in many homes, where now children are growing up fatherless. And then you have the mother who is basically told that she needs to be like a man. And one of the sad stories that I think a lot of people don't realize is they'll grow up in a single mother household, single parent, and it's usually a mother. And they would say, for Father's Day, you'll also celebrate your mother for Father's Day. And I get it. I get it, because that's the only parent that you have. But at the same time, your mother is not a father. They're completely different people, right? They bring something different to the table. And a mom can never be a dad. Sorry. And a dad could never be a mom. Sorry. That's just the reality. So what happens is we start twisting and breaking the family apart, where now, it's okay if you don't have a father to take care of you, the government's going to take care of you. We'll give you money. Forget about the dad. You don't need that. First of all, he's toxic. This masculinity thing, you don't need it. As a matter of fact, you know what? It's okay to be a weak, emotional man. And you will see this, again, from the sexual revolution. Look at TV shows and look at how men were portrayed during this time and afterwards, where the dad is always like the dummy, right? The weak character, where the mom is the one that wears the pants in the household, and she'll, oh, be careful, don't say anything. Yeah, yeah. And you don't want the husband to say anything because the wife's going to hit him up when they get home, right? So all of these things that people thought it's funny, but little by little, it starts breaking apart the family. That, on top of that, you have the whether a baby's a baby or not issue, right? And what right do we have to take their lives and things like that. I'm trying to be careful with my wording. Again, we've probably already said 1,000 things that will get us shut down.
It's okay. I think I said way worse things in my other live stream, and they haven't taken that down yet, so we're
okay,
good.
then good. Because, again, that's another one where it's, oh, now the baby, which is, think about this. This is what makes me so sad and heartbroken for women that have been intoxicated with the idea of feminism, which is, okay, you're brave, you're strong, you don't need a man. You can be a man. You can be the boss. You can be a boss B, or whatever it is that they promote nowadays. There is something that women bring to the table that a man could never bring. A man could never bring life from himself as a woman is able to. That is the miracle of life happens in a woman. Look at Our Lady, right? Without Mary, we wouldn't have Jesus Christ. He manifested himself. And this was God's plan from the beginning, to use a woman to be able to bring our Lord and Savior, the one that restores all of creation, came through a woman. So how is it that now women have been told, be the boss, you can be like a man, instead of telling them, you have something that a man will never have. This is the most precious thing. A man wouldn't exist if it wasn't because of their mother, right?
True.
So all of these things where now women will take this and say, oh, it's just a clump of cells. Oh, this is nothing. It's my body, my choice. And now I can do whatever I want. So now even the most precious thing is seen as nothing more than something that you can discard if you don't want it, right? When it's not
Right.
even an it's a person. So again, this masculinity issue, the alphabet issue, the feminism issue, the abortion issue, all of these things, all of them are directed at one thing, the destruction of the family.
True. And that's where it all comes down to. I love how you said that. And, you know, it's kind of had this tear down on society and it's crept in over time where it's like people haven't really seen it, you know? And I
Yeah.
think something that the media really likes to do, and we need to be, you know, we need to be aware of this, is that they'll introduce something. We'll say, oh no, that's too much. So they'll pull it back a little bit. But then we're like, yeah, I guess that's okay. And then next year they go full force to where they were, where they wanted to be. And then we're like, oh, that's fine.
Yep.
Because we were introduced to it slowly. We
Yep.
need to be vigilant about this because that's how they've been able to do this. They've been able to use the term women's rights, you know, as a way to get us to advocate for these horrible, horrible things. And you know, I think it's really hard because also with the alphabet agenda and things going on there, you know, we have to also acknowledge that everyone, almost everybody, a significant amount of them who have dealt with same-sex attraction, it's because of past abuse as a child. You know, that is a huge, huge thing that is not being addressed, is that
Right.
most, if not all of these people, except for the ones that are going into group thinking because they just think it's a fad, it's like the newest
Yep.
fashion trend. But these people who are truly struggling with body dysphoria, right, right, yeah,
Yes.
they actually have been abused previously, maybe as a child in some way. And
Yeah.
that's not being addressed. Instead, they're just being affirmed in their mental illness.
Yeah.
And instead of being loved, you know, and things that they're being told to do things that will harm them, but they're told it's out of love. So their
Yeah.
idea of love is now warped. I mean, it's
Yep.
already warped. But it's absolutely insane the things that we have to endure and go through today. And so for me as well, it's like when I see these people, I don't necessarily have a hatred or anything like that. Maybe a little annoyance. But I mean, you can have righteous anger, you know, for some things
Sure.
that have happened, like, you know, the after party that happened and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sad for them. I have compassion
Right.
for them. But it's like, how do we stand our ground as Catholics? How do we stand our ground as pro life Catholics, have this backbone, but still be able to reach out to these people in these, you know, alphabet communities and these pro choice communities and help them, especially with the cards we're dealt with today? I mean, before it used to be on the level of education. People just didn't know about it, and we didn't even have to struggle with the alphabet stuff until 2016, really.
Right.
But it's like, how can we reach those people now that we've gone so far? You know?
Yeah. I think the first thing we can do is just simply to do what Christ taught us, which is to love one another. If we can begin there, everything else can follow in the proper manner. As you mentioned before, a lot of these people are carrying actual trauma. Sure, there are the people that will fall into the fad, and this is what I think the majority of it is nowadays. But there are those people that are actually struggling. But for those people to even listen to your message of truth, right? They need to first see you as somebody that they can actually listen to. If you're just some random preacher in the street, as unfortunately we've seen sometimes, they're well-intentioned Christians, not necessarily Catholic most of the time, and they're out there in the streets screaming at these people, going to the parades, and sometimes they mean well, but the approach is not as fruitful as it could be. And a lot of times it's because of these people. You need to understand that it's an emotional issue for them, right? It has to do with their identities, how they see themselves. So for you to be able to reach these people out, the first thing you got to do is be able to level with them. And the best way to level is just being a genuine person that cares for their soul. If you don't actually care for these people's souls, I really doubt you're going to be able to bring anything of value to them. It doesn't matter how much truth you think you know, it doesn't matter how good your logic and your reasoning is. People can read right through that, and you will just come out as somebody that's just self-righteous, as opposed to somebody like, oh man, this person's saying this when it hurts me, but I can tell that they love me. And I think that's what's going to change things. So if the beginning of it all is you doing it in love and doing it because you genuinely care about the soul of this individual, I think from there, God's going to give you the wisdom needed to use those arguments that you may know, to use that logic, to use that reasoning, that to be more effective. So I'm not saying be some softy that tries to be like, "Oh, let's just be all ecumenical and everybody's just gonna, they're gonna listen to me." That's not how it works. But again, just doing it with that right approach, I think that's the beginning of it, of how we can actually reach these people.
I agree. And that's, I think, really difficult. I love what you said because, again, I've seen this at, abortion clinics when I've stood outside and prayed and things, is like there are pro-lifers who stand there and yell at these people. And it's just like, why would you be like, I
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
I can't say it on here. But it's like they're not helping. I mean, yes, their intentions might be good, but at the same time, I think good intentions come out a different way. Um, and like you said, we really need to have some sort of foundation if these people are going to listen to us. And that's why I think we need to work within our own circles. I think advocating is
Right.
really great, like going to rallies and things. I think you can
Yep.
connect with like-minded people, really make sure that you're getting good information and support, because I think we need
Right.
support too from people who have our similar views, because if we're constantly around people who don't share our views, it's draining. It's really
Yes,
draining
it
because
really
you're
is. Yep.
constantly
Yep.
battling these things. And so I think it's really important to find like-minded people, and you can do those at rallies and advocacy, going outside abortion clinics and going to
Hmm.
these things. I think that's so important.
True.
But yeah, I think working in our own circles and helping our friends is so important. But we also
Hmm.
need to educate ourselves because, for lack of a better word, like keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer type thing.
Hmm.
Not
Yep.
saying these people are specifically our enemy, their sin is,
Hmm.
but
Right.
we do need to view it as how can we talk to these people in a way that they'll listen, and then how
Hmm.
can we educate ourselves on their side of the story enough so that we'll know how to address their worldview and where they're coming from,
Right.
because it's not going to come from, oh well, this is what I believe and this is why you should
Right.
believe exactly what I
Yep.
believe. We have different worldviews, we were raised differently. They're not going to
Yep.
believe everything I believe because maybe they got sexually abused when they were young, maybe
Right.
I got whatever. And so our stories are not the same. We can't just demand
Hmm.
people believe what we believe because of our worldview. We have to go based off
Yeah.
facts. We have to go based off of love. And above
Hmm.
all, we need to be like Jesus Christ, where he condemned sin, but he loved the sinner, and he sat with
Right.
sinners, but he never
Hmm.
stooped to their level. He always called them to repent.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the big things that I also want to highlight, which is, yes, me personally, I'm very for being that loving type and being somebody that tries to level with the people. But you will never catch me trying to tolerate the sin. And this is something that everybody around me, they know very clearly. And I hate to play this card because it seems kind of silly nowadays to say, "Oh, I have a friend that is this," or "I have a friend that is that," right? But the reality is that I do. I have friends from all of these different circles, but they all know where I stand. And they know that if they talk to me about these things, I'm going to call them out on the actions, on the behavior, and I'm going to say what the facts are. But they will never be able to say, oh, Daniel was a jerk to me, or he's such an intolerant person, this or that, because I'm really trying my hardest. And I'm not saying that to like boast on myself. What I'm saying is it's part of the strategy. This is a war. This is a spiritual war, and we need to have technique. We need to have plans. We need to have strategy. We need to learn how to deal in this battlefield of spiritual warfare and understand how to navigate it. Because in the end of the day, while it may seem that, like you said before, it may seem like maybe some people think we're looking at these people as our enemy. That's completely not what it is. These are people we love. And because we love them, we want to give them the truth. So understanding that, we realize that there is another factor, which is that spiritual dimension that we really need to learn to tackle. And as you said, we need to educate ourselves. But there's more to that. There's also not just educating yourself, but also living that lifestyle as a Catholic that you know you need to be living. What does that mean? It means you need to be going to adoration. You need to be going to confession frequently. It means you need to be going to Mass all the time that you need to be in Mass. It means praying the rosary on a daily basis. It means being a Catholic for real. And
Yes.
then all of these other things, those are the cherries on top. But if you don't have that underground, that layer, that foundation of being an actual Catholic, everything else doesn't even really matter because you're just doing it for show.
It's so true. And I think that's definitely something we need to implement more of. I think a lot of Catholics, they act like holier than thou in church. I've seen this so many times. And then out of church, it's like they're not even Catholic.
Right.
And, to the point you were making about people thinking these people are our enemies, it's like, no, but they're being attacked by the enemy. And we love them so much, we want to help them, and it's
Right.
like, if you know something's harming somebody, it's loving to tell them that. It's loving. I'd rather. Who said it? Like, I'd rather love somebody into heaven than tolerate someone into hell or something. There was a
Yes.
saying. Yeah, it's something like that. And I'm like, that is so true, especially nowadays. But as you were
Yep.
saying, there is a deeper spiritual agenda to this, and Father Ripperger has been a huge, huge help in me understanding the spiritual side of stuff. So if you guys don't know who Father Ripperger is, he's an exorcist. I don't know where he's based out of. I think it's Colorado now. He's been changed around a couple times.
Yeah.
But his talks are fantastic, and I highly
Yes.
suggest you listen to his talks on these topics because he goes into the nitty-gritty and it really helps you understand the spiritual side of stuff. And I think that's something that people like to cut out nowadays. They're just like, oh no, this is a human rights issue, or oh no, this is just this, or it's because
Yeah.
of my trauma or this, or but they don't take into account that Satan exists. And that's the
Right.
greatest lie Satan likes to tell people, is that he does not exist. Because if he doesn't exist, we're not looking for him. We're not vigilant against him. I believe who was it, St. Paul, who said he's like a roaring lion in the grass, in
That's
the
right.
tall grass. And so it's like, if we're not paying attention, it makes it easier for him to jump us, not necessarily
Yep.
possess us, but definitely to get us to think in those ways. And so
Yeah.
I definitely think there's a bigger agenda going on here, and a lot of people definitely do as well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that too. And I think going on to your point where a lot of times we do forget that there is something spiritual to this, it's very prevalent nowadays to be able to take all of these arguments. And I think what happens with a lot of Catholics is, even non-Catholic Christians, I think a lot of the things that are happening is we want to be so logical in our argument, which is good. It's good to have that too. It's good to be able to speak of these things from just using natural law, right, to get to people who understand. But I think that's made us soft because we think that if we know enough psychology, that if we know enough sociology, if we know enough of how to operate with the minds of people, that that's sufficient to tackle this matter. But what we need to realize is that it is a spiritual situation, right? So in the heart of it, that's why it's so important for us not to just be educated mentally, but to be fed spiritually. And I think that's probably the most important thing because in the end of the day, as before, this has a spiritual root. So going back to something that I mentioned earlier in the beginning, where the family is like a mirror image, right, of God himself. So God is God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and it's like a community within himself, right, where you have this family within himself. So we reflect that in a type of way, and also how a man and a woman that become one through the covenantal union of marriage, they are also a reflection of Christ and the church. So we see that all of these physical matters have like a mirror image in the spiritual world, and this does too. If you look, for example, in the Old Testament, one of Israel's greatest problems was that they would meet people from other nations, and what they would end up doing is, first, they would go have meals where these certain foods were being offered to idols. Later, Paul tells us in the New Testament that there's no such thing as other gods. They don't exist, right? So it's not an issue. But what happened is, for these people, that for the Israelites, when they would go to these meals, these offerings, they would start bonding with these people and mingling with these people and intermarrying with these people. And they ended up forgetting about God and worshiping these false gods. So they kind of get sucked into it little by little. And before they know it, now they're in a completely different field because they're no longer in covenant with God. They've broken themselves off. They've essentially excommunicated themselves from the people of Israel. And I think that happens to us now as well, where we start kind of like mingling with these things and we forget that there's a spiritual reality, that we're not just partaking of meals with them, but that everything is united, both the physical and the spiritual. And little by little, it starts dragging you on. And if you're not careful, if you're not equipped, you're going to probably end up thinking these things too, and you're going to be agreeing with it, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the church needs to change its teachings. Yeah, the church is archaic. And that's where that mentality starts to creep in, where you are now doubting the deposit of faith itself, because you start dealing with these things, not equipping yourself the proper way. So
No, it's
yeah, I
so
think
true.
we need to be really ready.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
I like
that's
stopped there, like when you're taking a sip.
no, it's okay. I appreciate it. No, it's okay. I can talk through my water, but I think it's so true, and especially nowadays, I feel like I have to say it too. Like church leadership is failing us, and I think there needs to be a level of detachment there. I think what really it comes down to is focusing, prayer and fasting for these people, prayer and fasting for the world. Honestly, that's something we definitely need to start doing again, because I don't know of anyone who really observes the whole fasting on Fridays anymore outside of Lent.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
many Catholics I talk to, they're just like, what? No, I have meat on Fridays. Like, oh no, I have regular meals on Friday. And I'm like,
yep,
okay, but like, we need to be doing this because we're
yep,
becoming too laxed in our faith. And
yep,
when we become lazy, that's when things start creeping in. We cannot become
exactly,
lazy in our faith. And even though it's
exactly,
difficult, I think nowadays our flesh is spoiled, so to speak. We just
for
keep
sure.
giving it whatever it wants. We don't actually train it. We don't train our will.
Yep,
So then when bigger issues pop up, we're just like, it's fine. Instead of
mm,
actually being like, no, this is wrong, and listening to our conscience. If we're not practicing this in everyday life by denying ourselves and mortifying ourselves, our will and our flesh, then when big stuff starts happening, we're less likely to stand up. We're less likely
yep,
to push back. And so I
mm,
see that happening today, and I want to tell people, like, start mortification. It doesn't have to be like this crazy throw yourself into thorn bushes like St. Francis of Assisi.
yeah,
But but we
yeah,
do need to have a level of it, where it's like
yeah,
we have to pray and fast, because those two things are so powerful.
yeah.
Um, and we just do not get that enough today at all.
No, absolutely. You know what? And as a matter of fact, I think this is a good opportunity I think we should just list off a couple of things that we should be doing, like automatically, no question, no doubt, as
Mm,
Catholics in these times. And to preface the things that we should be doing, I want to say this. People, wake up. Wake
yeah.
up. Like, if you think that everything that's happening around the world, oh, it's going to get better, don't worry about it. Or you may think, oh, yeah, Christ wins in the end anyway, so let's just wake up. Like, your children are in trouble. Our children are in
Hmm.
trouble. Our church is suffering. Our Lady watches us and sees that we are over here doing nothing while her son suffered to death for us, right? So wake up and realize that everything that's happening is a spiritual war, and that we need to be equipping ourselves not just intellectually but also spiritually. But I think we should list a couple of things that every Catholic should be doing automatically to
Yeah.
battle this, to protect your family, to protect yourself, to protect your community and the country that you're in. So I think the first thing that I would like to say is make sure, whether it's something that you're dealing with or somebody else is dealing with these situations, anybody, I think we need to start doing penitentiary acts for ourselves, communities. And I think one of those is the one that Amber Rose just mentioned, which is the Friday abstinence, right? So no meat on Fridays. It's simple. And look, I'm going to give you the
It's not
cheat code.
hard.
This is what I do. Yeah, it's not hard. And I'll give you the cheat code of how to make it easier. I don't know how many of you out there know what intermittent fasting is, but it basically means that you have a window when you can eat, right? So what I do, I just don't eat until dinner time. So I just have like some random, what we've been doing is just having like fish tacos on Fridays.
Aw,
And that's it. That's
delicious.
it. It's so easy. Yeah, yeah. It's so good. And it's only that. So you get to not only are you fasting, but you also do your abstinence in that day. And it's going to help you to be able to mortify the flesh in a way that is is going to be a little bit easier mentally because I feel like a lot of this is more of a mental difficulty for people when it comes to fasting
I
and
agree.
abstinence. So that's
Yeah.
number one. What do you suggest?
Number two, it's kind of interesting, but I suggest getting a family patron saint, who
Ooh.
you ask for their intercession for your entire family. I mean,
Mm,
families already have guardian angels. I highly suggest asking them for their protection because when a
yes.
couple gets married, a new guardian angel is assigned to them. They still have their own guardian angels, of course, but there's a
Hmm.
family guardian angel then that is now assigned to them. Please,
Hmm.
please invoke the guardian angels,
Yes.
in their session because they are there to help you with these things,
Right.
to protect
Yeah.
your kids. They're called guardian angels for a reason. So that's my first
Exactly.
one. What's your second one?
Ooh. I like that. I think the next thing that we need to do is praying the rosary. I'm sure that everybody's gonna be like, oh, okay, I knew this was coming. But of course you knew it was coming because it works.
Yes.
I'll say this, one of my favorite motivators when it comes to things about the rosary, there's two people that have transformed my life. Number one is Keith. Of
Keith
course,
Nestor.
you know Keith. Yeah, Keith.
We
He
just did a
does
live stream.
oh, excellent. So
He's great.
amazing guy. He does rosaries. I think on a daily basis. He's on like a live stream or something where he
It's
does
called the
the
Rosary
rosary.
Crew.
Yeah, the rosary crew. So he has that available. Of course, I'm not there to be able to join live because I live in Tokyo. But watching his videos and the way that he talks about Our Lady was like one of the biggest influencers in my life to get me to pray the rosary. But the next one, and I'm sure you probably know him too, is from this channel called Gabby After Hours. You familiar with that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love
Love
that
him.
guy. Oh my goodness. Like coming into Catholicism, my biggest hurdle was Marian doctrine. Now I'm a slave to Mary. I love Our Lady de Theotokos. And I think a huge influence was the way that this man spoke about Our Lady with passion, spoke about the rosary with passion. So if you're somebody out there who's like, yeah, I know I gotta pray the rosary, but it's hard, I don't got time. Listen to me. I barely have time myself. I have two kids, as Amber Rose just mentioned earlier. I work a full time job. I do YouTube. I
Yeah.
do Instagram. I have to go to the gym. I have to do regular life stuff, but I have to do it. So, what do? Is I set the routine, which is before my children go to sleep, pray the rosary every night. That's it. I
Mm,
think if you put it in one part of your day where you know this is what you're going to do every time at that time, it's going to be a huge help. So, off to you
I
for the
completely
next.
agree. Yeah, and one thing with Keith is he actually wrote a book called Unpacking the Mysteries of the Rosary. And so I'm going to post the link to that in the chat box for anyone who wants to go check that out because that helped me a lot with the
Nice.
rosary. Just trying to figure out like how it works and like diving deeper into the mysteries. My
Yep.
second thing would definitely be getting sacramentals and blessing your children with the
Ooh,
sacramentals
yes.
like holy oil, holy salt, put it in your cooking, holy water. All of those
Mm-hmm.
things are really important. Also, Benedict medals,
Yes.
miraculous medals, get those blessed because the Benedict
Yes.
medal has an exorcism prayer on it specifically, like it's in it. And I actually
Mm-hmm.
have a bunch of them somewhere. But there's there's an actual exorcism prayer, and so it's so important whether
Nice.
you just put them in your house. In my house, we have one taped to the front door, actually, and then we have a crucifix over the
Nice.
front door as well. But if you wear one, whether it's on a bracelet or something, make sure it's blessed. But those are so important. And parents, please bless your children at night. Holy water, holy
Yes.
salt, holy oil, or just patting them on the head and saying, God bless you. So
Yes.
important.
Super huge. Actually, I love that one. I think that's probably my second favorite. My favorite is the rosary. But I love that one because it's something that I've been trying to do more and more of. Um, and like another plug for a friend, I'm sorry. But woodworker makes amazing stuff, so check his stuff out. Great rosaries, great crucifixes, stuff like
I
that. Home
have one of
office.
his. He's
Nice, nice,
fantastic.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give my last one, and then you can give your last one. But I think another thing that we should be doing is just going to confession. Go to confession often. Stay in a state of grace, because being in a state of grace doesn't simply mean, oh, if I die, I'm going to be able to go to heaven, or at least, purgatory. But being in a state of grace means that you are more fully connected to God than you would be otherwise, of course, obviously. What does that mean? It means that when you are dealing in situations in a daily basis, whether it be temptation or whether it be at a time where you are confronting someone and you have to bring the truth of the gospel to them, the Spirit of God is going to use you in a more powerful way because you have that connection. That's what it really means to be in a state of grace. So if you've committed a mortal sin, don't wait. Don't wait. Don't rack up sin. Just get rid of that. Go to confession. Have a truly contrite heart. Make sure that you're going there. Do a proper examination of conscience. Make sure that you're not being soft on yourself, but also don't be scrupulous. So take advantage of that beautiful gift that God gives us to the sacrament, and especially this sacrament. So reconciliation is amazing, and I would say it's my second favorite sacrament. So that's
I
that's my last
completely
one.
agree. Okay, yeah, no, I completely agree. And some resources for people who want to go to confession but maybe don't know how, or they've been away for a while. The Bulldog Catholic has a
Yes,
wonderful PDF on the examination of conscience. And if you're
you got me
struggling
on
to
that.
have a I got you. Yeah, it's fantastic. I learned about it on Twitter. Shockingly, I learned something on
Nice,
Twitter.
nice.
But I use it religiously. Like I print it out, literally religiously. I print it out and then dropping my jokes. And then I
I'm
just
sorry.
like have it by my prayer corner. And then if I want to do my exam, and I just pull it out and I start flipping through it. And it tells you
Yeah.
like how to do confession if you haven't been in a while. It tells you the questions that you need to ask. It goes through the 10 Commandments, everything. Really good. And then if you're struggling with a contrite heart, ask Our Lady of Sorrows for help. Ask for her
Yes.
intercession to give you a contrite heart. Because she will. Because
Yes.
she's just like, my son died. Like, I will give you a contrite heart if you ask me.
Yep.
But that is something that needs to be cultivated a little bit. You have to kind of work on it. You have to ask her, and you still have to do work yourself and work on having a
Yep.
contrite heart. So my last suggestion would be to do the first Friday and or first Saturday devotions.
Yep.
These need to be done. I mean, and somebody said when you do one devotion, it's as though you're doing the other because the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the Sacred Heart of Jesus are as one. And
Yeah.
so people say if you do one, you're basically doing both. I personally love the first Friday devotion. That I've always had a very deep devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and Divine Mercy. And so for me, that's the one that I've always done, even though I have done the first Saturdays before as well. And you guys can look it up. I actually have a video about it on my channel. If you type into the search bar on my channel, like First Friday Devotion, you'll see it. But you can Google it as well. And this is just so important for to save souls. And then making reparations for the attacks against the Sacred Heart is just
Yeah.
so important. Making
Excellent.
reparations.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
those
That's
would
a
be
good
mine.
one. Yay. Excellent. I think that those are pretty good basic. I mean, I say basic, but these are extremely powerful tools that everybody should be using when we're talking about these things in every facet of your life. Whatever it is as a Catholic, these are the musts that I think we
Yes.
should be implementing.
I completely agree. And it's like I know it can be a lot, so don't like try to jump in all of it at once.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to do the first Friday devotion or oh, I'm going to pray the rosary every day. And then slowly work up from there because I think we can also burn ourselves out sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, go for it. Go big or go home and I'm already home, so
There you go. There you go.
But yeah, no, Daniel, I really appreciate you hopping on and doing this live stream with me. I can't believe it's already been an hour. Wow, that's
Wow,
crazy.
it
That's
flies.
insane. Where can my peoples find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and on YouTube by just searching for the tag The Jewish Catholic. So again, that's The Jewish Catholic, and you can find me on Instagram and on YouTube. On my YouTube channel, basically what I talk about is our faith, Catholicism, but giving the Jewish perspective, the Hebraic perspective, so you can understand the roots of the faith and why I think it's fruitful to learn these things. And in addition to that, if you're somebody that does Bible in a year and Catechism in a year, you're gonna notice a lot of the same themes. So I'm very grateful for those tools as well. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much again, Daniel. We'll have you back on sometime this
yeah.
year again because we always have great conversations. So,
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's really been an honor.
of course, of course. And with all of that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.